Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore, and time for another whiskey tasting. This one is going to have a little language explanation at the beginning of it. A little controversy back in 2003 when Glenmorangie was suggesting that Glenmorangie meant the Glen of Tranquility, and some people got upset about that and said, no, it's not the Glen of Tranquility, you're misrepresenting the Gaelic language. If you broke it down, it would be a Glen of the Big Meadow. And honestly, I don't know if it's worth going to war over that. But basically, in the end, the distillery stood its ground and said, look, most of these distillery names are taken from Gaelic names, but then kind of anglicized. And so you have to know where the roots are that they're coming from to come up with these different names. And that is very true. I've had some people say to me in the past that I haven't pronounced a word properly in Gaelic or Gaelic. And I get that. Look, I'm an American. I'm going to do the best I can. When I do my pronunciation videos, the caveat is that I'm not going to round my mouth up the same way as a native speaker will. But if you're an American speaker, or even some European countries, if you have a certain accent, some of that accent is always going to work into your pronunciation of a word. Believe me, I've tried to learn French and be as close to pronouncing things the way that the French do, but you have to roll your R's in a certain way. I'm good at that, but not great at that. And there are subtle things that you pick up over long periods of time. So, hey, let's just relax a little bit and say it's not going to ever be 100% perfect. And even within a country, you can have different dialects that will have different emphasis points on different words. And when we're going from one language to another, all bets are off. So anyway, you know both stories. You can go either way you want to go. Now, Quinta Ruban, on the other hand, that's kind of confusing. Quinta is a Portuguese word that means a estate that holds, that makes wine. And Ruban is a Gaelic word that means ruby. And so that brings us to a tasting of this 14-year-old Quinta Ruban, which is aged in ruby port casks. So there's your tie-in. All right. Anyway, let's do nosing and tasting of this. Language is fun, but boy, sometimes people really want to argue a point and be precise on things, and when you're dealing with different accents, that is really, really hard to do, and translations too. All right, so this is 46% ABV. The original version of this was a 12-year, and it was aged for 10 years in an ex-bourbon barrel. So basically taking the original Glenmorangie with a higher ABV, and then 2 additional years in the ruby port. Now it's 12 years in bourbon and 2 extra years in the ruby port. 2 years is a long time in a ruby port cask. I know that the weather in Scotland is mild, but depending on how wet that cask is, I think that'll give you a good idea of why the color of that is as dark as it is. On the original, they don't really use colorant as far as I can tell, so I'm assuming they're not using any colorant in this as well. And so this is coming from the cask. So there's a lot going on in this nose, and a lot of it comes from that ruby port cask. You're going to get, I end up with a really nice soft baking spice, some leather, tobacco. When I first nosed this, there was a grassy note, like wet cut grass, a little bit of chocolate, some raisin, slightly dry, Cheers. This is so heavy on this berry and raisin fruit note. And it is, all I can put this down to is that it is aggressively ruby port. There is so much fruit in this, and it's almost syrupy how much fruit is in there. I get a little oak in the background, gives me that little nuttiness, reminds me of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There's a slight bit of pepper on it. When it finishes, you're left maybe with a little bit of like a slightly bitter cocoa note. You're definitely getting that jelly jam kind of a flavor just lingering on the palate. This reminds me in a way of Basil Hayden's dark rye, in that, now in that case, they actually poured the wine into the whiskey, and they were very heavy-handed about it. I think this, no wine has been poured in here, but again, a very aggressive cask is going to impart a lot of its influence if left for 2 years with the whiskey. And so this, I would say, if you are a fan of port wines, this might be a nice transition whiskey for you to get into drinking whiskey. For me, I like it, but it's probably not a go-to. That grassy clump of grass in your mouth, it hits on the nose, it hits on the palate, is probably, in a little mustiness, kind of throws me off a little bit. But there are going to be times when I'm in the mood for this, and so I'll be all over it. It just feels slightly heavy-handed to me. It'd be nice if it was a little bit more subtle. But hey, a whiskey for everybody. So if you like high impact, bold, and you really love that ruby port influence, this is going to be the whiskey for you. It is not light like Glenmorangie 10 is, with that, you know, very light fruit, light body, flavorful, but you're definitely more into your apples and pears. This is, I can't tell any apples or pears in this at all. Nose is nice though. I do, when I ignore the, that leather tobacco grassy note, what else is there is really, really nice to me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have you had it? Leave some comments below. What do you think? Do you like a heavy influence of port wine on a whiskey? And or would you rather they just stop messing around with all these finishing casks? Leave your comments below, and I'm going to finish this up. And give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to watch more. Until next time, cheers and Slan Java. Almost sugary. Slight bit of malt in there. It's good. But that may be my only bottle of it.